A lot has happened in this space, and Shouvik has actually been at the forefront of many of these developments. Of course, by now you would have got a hint. We are talking about the PSLV launch, the satellite launch in India, which is actually come from the ISRO stable, which is known for its low-cost satellites. Now, the interesting part is this is, I think, Shouvik, correct me if I'm wrong, but over 62 satellite launches by now.
Yes, of course. The PSLV is, it's been, I think, globally one of the most reliable satellite launchers. It started in 1993, and over the past 32 years, the only two times it has failed was the first launch, which was a demonstration launch. It didn't manage to pull it off successfully, but since then, until October 2025, when its satellite injection didn't go well according to because of some technical glitch. But apart from that, in 32 years, not a single time has the PSLV failed, and that sort of is what makes the PSLV so special. It's of course been the rocket that has launched the first Chandrayaan for us. It has launched Mangalyaan for us. So an absolutely landmark feat of engineering from ISRO. And now, of course, as you mentioned, Leslie, is being privatized. And in 2022, in fact, the privatization contract was given to a joint venture between Larsen and Toubro and HAL. And well, now it's almost ready. And in fact, it's ready for takeoff, it's ready for its launch, it's ready to make its first commercial it would be wrong to say its first commercial mission, but its first private commercial mission, where it's going to kind of become like this sort of like a taxi service for space, is what some people like to refer it to. But really interesting times, because this is one such example of an Indian research body creating a foundational technology and moving it into the private sector so very well.
I love this transition, from hardcore research organization, sort of
Right.
now, if I know outsourcing has become a kind of a bad term, or a much abused word at this point in time, but literally what ISRO has done has guided all, the private industries, a lot of startups also. In fact, many of the ex-ISRO guys are
Right.
on the boards of many of these startups, including the one which you visited, Skyroot,
Right.
then Agnicool, and many other such startups. But the interesting part is that as ISRO has sort of mentored, guided these startups, it has moved a lot of this learnings to the private sector, and now it is trusting the private sector with these launches. As you rightly mentioned, the Hindustan
Absolutely.
Aeronautics Limited, the HAL, and Larsen and Toubro tie-up that we are seeing, and I think more will follow. I'm sure a lot more will happen. But the interesting part is that now ISRO wants to and wants to focus more on research and its mission objectives.
I think that's a good strategy to do, in fact, because when the space sector was privatized, the general idea was that ISRO's strength has always been core research. But at the same time, there is a clear opportunity to earn commercial revenue from space missions. The two things should not be one person's job. You can't expect ISRO to be sort of like a business generator for you, and also do the kind of things that we've seen NASA do historically. The moon missions, the manned space missions, which we're planning, building a space station, that's another thing. So it just makes sense for ISRO to sort of be the research body, and ISRO continues to do that. And at the same time, Leslie, as you mentioned, that ISRO, India's space story is very closely intertwined with ISRO. It can't be separated at any point, even now. So all the private startups, they get a lot of mentorship from ISRO. In fact, just today itself, and for reference, the 27th of November, when we're recording this, I was in Hyderabad at the inauguration of India's first private sector space factory, unless, of course, you count HAL's facility. And HAL is sort of like a pseudo semi government public sector undertaking body. But it was so exciting to be, we were literally standing right next to the rocket, which is supposed to take off in 2 months. And they showed us through the assembly lines that this is very real. It's not just on paper work happening. It's the rocket facility is real. They're ready to build one rocket every month and scale it up even further if needed. um, so one private rocket built every month by a startup for commercial missions is definite real progress. And the people behind it, both Pawan Chandana and Naga Bharat Dhaka, they've uh, they've both
Correct.
worked at ISRO. They've both been systems engineers, and the former ISRO
But
chairman Somnath was
these are
here.
for smaller payloads, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yes, so up to
Yeah.
500
Yeah.
kilos low Earth orbit. And this is, in fact, interestingly, a sector which ISRO built
Correct.
the SSLV, or the
Yes.
Small Satellite Launch Vehicle. They built that and they've given it away to, once again, HAL to kind of build it by themselves and launch it by themselves, or with ENSIL, which is the other space PSU, which is supposed to take satellite launch contracts.
And also, you may want to tell our viewers and listeners a little about the orbits, basically, because many of them are for the LEOs, the low Earth orbits, but some of them are also for the other orbits. So you can probably just.
Right, absolutely. So the PSLV, which is the first rocket that we were talking about, and that is it can go up to higher orbits. The idea is that geostationary satellites, which we knew were the conventional satellites which we first saw in the 90s and so on, they would be massive satellites, and um, they would have these requirements where they would be geostationary on top of a particular coordination in the Earth's orbit, and they would be at 36,000 kilometers above Earth. Whereas in low Earth orbit, in fact, the low Earth orbit satellites are a new piece of technology. They are much smaller, they're easier and cheaper to build. And that's what these small rockets, like the one Skyroot has showed today, and like ISRO's SSLV also. Just for reference, PSLV's total capacity is about 2,300 kilos of satellite payload that it can carry to space.
You can tell our friends what these payloads are all about, because I think the interesting part is when you find Elon Musk's satellites going out, you find the space shuttles, you
Right.
can find, because the low cost ones, if anybody's if there's any comparison, obviously you have NASA, but you also have Elon Musk's low cost satellites.
Of
Yeah.
course, SpaceX has,
Absolutely.
absolutely drastically crashed the
So
prices of
what are these
satellite
payloads
launch.
all about? Just out of interest, so that people know a little about the payload part of it.
Absolutely. So the payloads are, it can be any satellite basically that anyone would want. The core difference is that in the small rockets, the payload or the main objects that it will carry to orbit, they can be smaller. And the big challenge for small satellites is that because Elon Musk, um, think of this as Elon Musk operating a bus, and what you need is a private cab, a four-seater small cab, because your capacity is small. But if you're waiting for a bus, you have to keep waiting until there are more passengers, and only then will a 40-seater bus come and travel. The same thing is for SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket series. What they've done is their rockets
Yeah,
have
yeah,
massive
absolutely.
capacities of 5,000 kilos, and their goal is they'll keep waiting until one large satellite demand comes, so that becomes the primary satellite or the primary payload on the rocket. And The other small satellites go as SpaceX calls it rideshare, so it's sort of like an Uber, a sort of rideshare model where one person is going somewhere, so you just join in for a ride and get dropped off in the middle. um, the problem with that is, of course, the small satellite makers, they have to wait for years at times. In fact, right now the word on the space industry street is that if you want to get onto a SpaceX rocket, you have to wait for 2 years. And that is the demand that ISRO's small rocket and Skyroot's SSLV, Skyroot's Vikram 1, the small rocket, they're all trying to cash in on, because they're saying, they're going to the small satellite makers and saying, hey, don't wait for Falcon 9 to take off. Just come to us. We'll launch your satellite, just your satellite. And I'm happy to launch a 300 kilo satellite. Eventually, once they build scale, of course, it will become cheaper. But For now, that is the goal
Yeah,
and
but
that
see,
is the
that's the
idea.
lovely part of it. No, wherever there's an opportunity, whenever the market, the market does not shrink as such. It just expands, and there's a lot of room for
Absolutely,
everybody. That each and
absolutely,
every time, you find people every time comparing ISRO with a NASA or with SpaceX. That's not needed really. There's room for everybody at this point in time, and
absolutely.
a lot of opportunity. And this is exactly where innovation kicks in. Where you find these small
Right,
pivots. Like I love, because I remember even having this very long chat with the Agnikul founders. Now you have had it with the Skyroot guys. Even they were
right,
talking about setting up a
right.
factory. I think what works for them also is the indigenous way in which they are developing materials. So like the engine itself is 3D printed. Now that lowers the cost to a very great extent. And to have a single 3D printed
Absolutely.
engine is one of the feats that ISRO has achieved. So Agnikul and all did it with the help of ISRO,
Right.
and that's an amazing feat. So I think
Absolutely.
there's a lot to look forward to,
Absolutely.
and I was just looking at some of the figures. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, something like the current market is something like $8.5 billion or $14 billion, and to reach some, I mean, the different projections.
So ISRO's, I mean, India's space economy, which is what the government has said, is that our economy is valued, space economy is valued at about $8 billion now. Um, and by 2033, our target is to grow to
40%.
$44 billion. Very sure this would include launch services, this would include your satellite manufacturing, ground stations. So, any space operation, basically, surveillance satellites is one key area where defense applications will kind of be used. Rather, defense applications will use surveillance satellites, and that itself will contribute to revenue. But for just rocket launches, the goal is by 2033, rocket launches will earn India about $3.5 billion per year. And if think of a small rockets, one single mission would be about somewhere between, say, somewhere around $4 million for one launch. So to get up to 3.5 billion, I think it's a long way, but of course, the start has to happen somewhere. And good thing that we're starting now. We've got with the PSLV, we've got a company like Larsen and Toubro and Leslie. Uh, you've covered companies for decades. We all know how big a conglomerate Larsen and Toubro is in the in the construction side, engineering and construction. So a lot of hope on L&T to be become a successful space company.
Exactly, and I think many people don't realize this about L&T. That fine, it may talk about engineering, procurement, and construction, so it's the EPC kind of stuff, but they don't realize it's actually a tech powerhouse. Now, whether you're talking of space, whether you're talking of bullet trains, whether you're talking, I think L&T is practically in every area, and of course, on the cutting edge of AI
Absolutely.
also, with agentic AI and Gen AI and all that kind of LLMs in house. They don't call it LLMs, but basically they do a lot of work. But coming back to PSLVs, of course, I
Right.
think it's important for the viewers and listeners. Many of us will be knowing, even if you still are wondering what is the relevance of a PSLV. Remember, we can't function without satellites. All your smartphones, your GPS can't work
Absolutely.
without it. You won't find your directions properly. Weather forecasting, helping farmers, helping tens of other things that are
In fact, disaster prediction is one massive thing.
nothing.
Airplanes can't function without
In fact,
satellites because
modern life may not function without the satellites, as simple as that, period. So those payloads are
absolutely
extremely important from the point of view of advancing research, where it takes a
right.
payload, sends back data, and all those things are recorded with the help of AI, without the help of AI. In many cases, now of course those things are happening. But yes, I mean, for the it's a matter of pride for the nation that. India is
Right.
taking the steps in the right directions. And of course, before we conclude this particular section of the PSLV, I must mention, and Shavik, I would love you to add on that. The way we have written about ISRO is that not everybody, a very significant portion of ISRO employees are not from IITs. They're from actually mid-tier engineering colleges. So
Absolutely.
you don't
Absolutely.
require. I mean, with I have tremendous respect for the IITs, what the work that the IITs and triple IITs are doing. But remember, you don't have to always study from an
Right.
IIT. The ISRO has shown the way.
Absolutely, and in fact, Leslie, it's great that you brought this up because if you speak with anybody at ISRO or anybody who's worked at ISRO before, they'll always tell you that you don't need to be an IITian, and you also don't need to be an aerospace engineer certified with a degree from college, because a lot of people who work on, say, the outside fairing of a rocket actually have a
Yeah.
degree in metallurgy, and in engineering entrance exams a lot of people will tell you that metallurgy is typically chosen by people who get the lower ranks because they couldn't get a mechanical or an electrical or one of the core fields. I was myself one of them. I sat for an engineering entrance exam and I got a decent rank, but I was told that, hey, listen, if you want a good college, you have to choose, like a metallurgy or one of these fields. And when you're a student to you, it feels like, oh, metallurgy, what do I do even with such a degree? But one of the biggest applications and one of the biggest places that will hire you if you do metallurgy is space, is ISRO. It's the space startups, and it's Larsen and Toubro. It's all the metal and steel companies.
Not everything is about AI.
Absolutely, and over here, literally, like far lesser things are about AI than about getting core engineering right, and that's a fascinating thing, in fact, because it also opens up space as a career opportunity for far more people than just the ones who have probably dabbled in aviation
So viewers
before.
and listeners, I think it's a
So
very
yes,
important learning for us that not this world is not only about. I know we talk a lot about artificial intelligence day in and day out, and there's not a single day that goes without some kind of news breaking out as far as AI is concerned. But remember, the world is so much more than just AI developments and what Shouvik has just given us a
absolutely
lowdown on the PSLV step, the strides that India has made in space and the kind of opportunities that it throws up for all of us. That's simply astounding, and it gives a lot of hope as we are concerned. Of course, now we have to come back to things that are AI again. So let's talk a little about the Gemini 3. Yeah,
Yay!
absolutely. I mean, the Gemini 3 launch is
Nano banana, nano
Nano
banana
Banana
pro,
Pro,
and
and
you
it's. I think the more important point is that it is unsettling Nvidia. Nvidia stocks have fallen down because of the whole GPU versus TPU debate. Do I feel personally? I think to clarify to our viewers and listeners, I think it's important to understand that Google still uses GPUs. It's not that it has given up on GPUs, but
know,
yes,
right,
TPUs are basically tensor processing units, which are actually what are known as ASICs. So the broad kind of word is like application specific integrated circuits. So ASICs are, as the word suggests, they are the integrated circuits or the chips that are specifically meant for machine learning or AI workloads. So specific tasks oriented,
right,
and that's where their it is their strength also. And at the same time, if you look at a GPU can do parallel processing, which simply means that I would say that okay, if I were to use a corner sort of a much abused word, I would say it as GPU suffer from ADHD, so they're all over the place. They can do multi-purpose tasks, but just to draw a parallel and analogy,
but they can do multiple tasks
but
at
very
the same time,
efficiently.
Leslie. So
So unlike
yeah,
it's not
yeah,
ADHD in that sense because they can do it very very efficiently. And also the AI is so much more than just simple tasks. So for there's many tasks that you require a GPU, and of course gamers will not be
right,
able to do with a TPU, so they will require a GPU proper. So yes, but it is
right,
unsettling. It basically has opened up a window for other companies because see Apple is also coming up. I think Apple has developed its own chips. We have, Meta was talking about but now Meta has said that okay fine they will takes I mean that information has reported that Meta will source some 1 million TPUs from Google, and that actually was one of the major reasons why the Nvidia stock took a beating. Then there have been other developments also. I think there were talks with OpenAI whether they did. I think they fell through, but all said and done, while there is this ecosystem lock-in for most of the people with the CUDA platform of NVIDIA, it does give a room for a little play by other companies. And more importantly, I think, the way I love to give the analogy of perplexity. So when you look at Perplexity, when it came out with a search,
Right.
it is not everybody expected that. We initially everybody said no, Perplexity is going to kill Google search. No, it did not. Let's be clear about it.
Of course.
Because we had explained, I remember in our writings we used to detail about these things, that no, Google search still owns a very large share of the market. And even when I had this chat with Arvind Srinivas also, he also explained, said, no, I'm not even challenging that 90%. It's just that the quality, the top market, the premium segment of the search, even if I can take away a little market share of that, it gives me a lot of revenue. And these are important considerations, that when companies come up and become challengers, in Google's case, it's ironical because actually Google, all the foundation LLMs, they owe their existence to Google's transformer technology. So when Google comes back into the play, it's good to see Google back in action.
Right. And also, I think, Leslie, you and I have discussed this in previous podcasts or even generally, that Google, being the kind of behemoth that it is and the kind of foundational technologies and patents that it owns, you can't ever really dismiss Google
It is
from a
silly. It
sector
is
where it
silly,
has dabbled in.
very naive kind of thing, because given the market share
It's
that it has, I mean, you just have to look at the numbers.
right. And also from a culture standpoint, from an engineering standpoint, I remember in May I was at the Google headquarters in Mountain View, and in fact this year is when they really sort of surged ahead in AI, because in 2024 a lot of people said Google's AI work is not as impressive as OpenAI. Meta was doing very well with its Llama platforms. Anthropic and Perplexity were being highly appreciated, but not Google. But 2025 May, with its new Gemini products, its Project Astra, making it to production, now it has, and also VO3, the video generator. All of these platforms coming together really sort of cemented this verdict, or this notion that, you can never say Google's done, and oh, Perplexity is going to kill Google, or ChatGPT is going to take away Google's
I
search
think
dominance.
Google went through a little of a, I mean, shift, or I would say it was resting on its past laurels, but it became a little bureaucratic. Because as a company starts growing,
Right.
it creates many bureaucratic
Right.
layers, and this is something that, very interestingly,
Right.
one of the Google co-founders, Sergey Brin, spoke about it, saying that, he found it strange. It's an interview that is there available on the internet, saying that he found it very strange that he was not allowed to, some of the bureaucratic layers prevented him from running the code on Gemini. So, so these were kind of smaller things that. Realized, and I think he spoke to Sundar Pichai saying that, get rid of all these kind of things. And I mean, I'm sure, because
Right.
all said and done, he's got the voting rights, the veto shares, as they say. Both the co-founders, they're still the
Right.
owners of Google.
Right. And Brin is very much back at Google, like last this May. In fact, when we spoke with the Google hierarchy, everyone had the opinion that, listen, he's in office
And he
more than
codes.
most of us, and right, absolutely, and he's personally invested in it. And I remember he had a small session alongside Demis Hassabis, where he said that, as an engineer, you can't not be back to coding in this particular era, because these are one of the foundational eras which shape generations going forward. And so the least I can do
Yeah.
is be back at work. And I think that also really goes on to show the kind of work ethic that people of Brin's era have had, where even at the age of 55, and he's probably one of the most influential people in Silicon Valley, and he still had that notion that, no, I'm still an engineer at heart, I'm still a scientist at heart. and this is what I do. So it's really interesting to see. But I wanted to ask you, have you tried Nano Banana to create anything fun?
I mean, I'm glad you asked me that question because I did try Nano Banana. In fact, I did one of the Mint Tech talks I had written about it. So I tried, I'd written about this.
Right,
I said, okay, show me a monkey with a banana. And this guy kept on showing a mandrill time and again, from Jumanji. So one of those things. And then it suddenly, I said with a single banana, it kept on showing me four bananas. It was going berserk all the way. And I just gave up. I was just tired of that entire exercise. At this age, you don't really have the
right,
kind of patience that you have at 20 to keep on playing around with it. And you're a little unforgiving as far as these mistakes are concerned. I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but now with Google, the advanced Nano, Banana Pro, etc., things have improved a lot. So I would say, but
right,
what impressed me
right,
even back then when Nano Banana was introduced, it was the speed at which it was converting. Okay, that accuracy didn't impress me, but
right.
the
Of
speed
course.
definitely impressed me. Now it's both the speed and the
Right.
accuracy that is impressive. So I'm finding that as a significant change. But having said that, of course, you do have the flip side of it, which we all have been dealing with. It is that it creates fake PAN cards, fake Aadhaar cards, fake. Yeah. So
Oh, yeah, yeah.
now boarding passes and then maybe company ID cards and all, it can just create. Now what happens, not everybody is going to look at the synth images or the watermark images and all. Not everybody is going to look at that.
Right,
And people don't even know that, like, if you give a 500 rupee note, most people can't detect a fake note from a unless you're running it through some
right,
kind of a process. So this is exactly what's going to
right,
happen in most cases. The majority of the cases, we are going to be victims of these kind of fake images. Like, imagine, for like celebrities, like even Amitabh Bachchan have been talking about digital arrests during Kaun Banega Corrupt. But you still find
right,
RBI has been putting out note after note. Every bank has been, sending out mailers after mailers and WhatsApp messages that there's nothing called a digital arrest. But invariably, every second
right.
day, you will find a story about some person losing, crores of rupees
Yes.
or lakhs of rupees to a digital arrest. So the danger is like, okay, you will have a fake PAN card or the fake ID card or the fake Aadhaar card or something, and there's going to be quite some commotion before things settle down.
Yes.
uh, that's we always say tech is a double-edged sword. uh, so Nano
Right.
Banana is going to make us go bananas over all these things.
Make the world
Absolutely.
go bananas.
So yeah, we're going to slip over
Right.
some of these bananas for some time.
Yes,
Anything?
absolutely.
Yeah, one thing which I wanted to raise, I think both of us would agree, we love robotics. So that I was reading
Right.
that news and was pretty intrigued about the Chinese robot that walked some 100 kilometers and then asked for a new pair of shoes. How did you find that?
That's, I mean, I think the most practical thing to ask after 100 kilometers of walk is a new pair of shoes.
I thought that was a very cute kind of remark.
Absolutely, but I've also come to realize that these are the kind of headlines which make people convinced that the robots are sentient already. We
The
just don't know
Terminator.
it yet. Yeah, absolutely. Someday they're gonna sort of
I
maybe
think
shoot us if we ask them to walk
important
100
to
kilometers.
clarify that sometimes most of the robots find it difficult even to pick up a cup properly. They struggle even today. Dexterity is really
Yes,
a problem with robots. They're very good, like for instance, there are plenty of sort of in the warehouse and all, they perform very well. But when we're talking about humanoids, there's a lot more to go, because it's a very cumbersome process. I mean, people probably do not appreciate the amount of effort that goes into making a single humanoid, whether it is computer vision, whether
right,
it is image recognition, the amount of sensors that go into a thing, you know, uh, uh, and the kind of platforms that these robots are built on. There's tremendous amount of effort. So we just have to realize that no, robots have a very long way to go before they can even match it. In certain
right.
areas, yes, definitely in the warehouse and all, they are better because they have more strength. Let's understand that they can pick up more weight than, but that doesn't necessarily make them a thinking individual. Like, even the smartest,
Right.
so-called smartest of robots, will not even match the prowess of a 5-year-old kid, perhaps. It's hard to say.
But interesting that we're definitely making
Yeah,
progress.
because that would be the same as, sort of, debating whether artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence, which is supposed to be, the matched intelligence of all humans together, is going to happen anytime soon. Now, recently, even Gartner came up with the statement saying that it's not going to happen in a hurry. Of course, there are always those detractors who will tell you that it will happen by the end of the decade. But I think we have been
Oh, yeah,
covering it
yeah.
every year. The technologies that fall by the
Right.
wayside. We have been discussing that what works, what has worked, and what will not work. Anything else you would like to discuss before we wind up?
I think we've had a very crisp episode this week, and I think the 3 points: Google's Gemini 3 progress, uh, India's private rockets, and of course, a self-pedaling robot. It really kind of sums up a very diverse week of news, if
Unless
you
you
think about it. Because on the other hand, we
unless
of
you want to
course,
talk a little about what Sam Altman has given a big update on ChatGPT powered device with John Ivy. So he has spoken, but
yeah, Johnny Ive's
yeah.
device is, I think, Altman has been pretty serious about it, and
But
uh,
we were also enamored with the rabbit. You're
I
forgetting
believe
that.
we've had a history of. I, in fact, had the good fortune of using the Rabbit R1 recently because a friend of mine got the device for himself from the US. It's interesting, and I personally feel that there is a lot to be excited about these sort of AI devices than to just be like, oh, it's not good enough, or the interface is not nice enough. But definitely very, very interesting, uh, and I can see why the appeal of a device without apps, with a single simple interface which works because it just works. I think that's a very attractive proposition from a user experience standpoint. It's just that I also feel that Rabbit, itself, and all the other companies are also still trying to figure out to find a balance between not having any apps and having some apps. So I think we're still getting there. Maybe the software experiences aren't ready
Yeah,
yet.
also, I think very importantly, sorry, I was just because I would have lost my trend of thought otherwise. It's just that whenever we talk about a new device or the new software, we tend to dismiss it because it's not proven. There's no market. But how else
Right.
would you do research? How else would you introduce a new device? Somebody has to take the call. Somebody has to fall by the wayside. Somebody has to fail. And this is that typically we say the cost of failure is something that they need to account for. OpenAI perhaps has the
Right.
ability or has the capacity to handle failure. They would have counted it or discounted this particular, in the revenue projections, etc. That's I presume that the CFO would have done that. But having said that, we also it's sobering to understand that when Apple was working on the. You remember we had Blackberries. You had to touch. You had the Windows mobiles where you had to keep on typing. You had the Nokia thing. We could not
Right.
use a mobile without a keypad. Then suddenly Apple introduced with the iPhone. You find that just with gestures. And I still remember, if I recall rightly, Steve Ballmer and all, just dismissed it, and they said, this is not going to work.
They've made a lot of
Yeah,
fun
I mean, there were a
of.
lot of
Right.
sort of he mocked the entire exercise. Now, it's not that Steve Ballmer didn't
Right.
understand technology, but sometimes we may not be able to read the tea leaves accurately. So it doesn't mean that just because we feel that a particular innovation is not worth it, that it's not ready. Because I don't see any other way of doing it. So there have to be failures, and these failures will sort of be the stepping stones to success. So I'm just happy with that we are trying
Correct.
different things. You can't take a simple form factor and say no, this is the last form factor on earth. No, this is not the Bible, please, for heaven's sake.
Absolutely. Well, definitely, and that I think is a very interesting note
Yes,
to end
absolutely.
this
I think
week on. That with every innovation, there is always a window to fail, but there's also a chance that even the most weirdest innovation might just be the world's next biggest product. So let's keep our eyes open and our
Yeah,
ears
so I
peeled for
hope our
that.
viewers and listeners, there are some entrepreneurs among us who are listening to this and feel a little not disheartened over the kind of failures that we are feeling, and just have to keep
Right,
on in it. Of course, if you have the wherewithal and the cash to burn. But yes, I think
right.
these are steps in the right direction. So please we wish you a lovely weekend.
See you.
Bye.